Okay, right. I think we are going to start. So as more people join us, hopefully there will be enough context for you to know what's going on. But to start off with, I just want to briefly welcome incredible experts, David BC from Care Ideals and Lorna Smith. If you wouldn't mind sort of saying hello and letting our audience know sort of who you are and what your background is.
Sure, thanks, Lucy. So I've been working in health and social care since 2001. Initially it was running large psychiatric hospitals, and I started Care Ideals in October 2014, supporting social care providers. We picked up our first client in January 2015, and then since then we've provided support for probably a bit more than 100 providers now. This is domiciliary care, care homes, nursing homes, and supported living. And the type of work has ranged from 2 or 3 day compliance visits, plus providing a comprehensive report thereafter, to 6 or 7 months of crisis management, working 7 days a week on site, very stressful, etc., etc. And a lot of what we currently do is much more focused on how a care business operates holistically, not just looking at the compliance element. I'll hand you over to Lorna.
Hello, nice to meet you all. So my name's Lorna. I'm a care business consultant at Care Ideals with David. My background prior to Care Ideals was in local authority work. I started out as a social worker, working in community teams, and really enjoyed the role, but then got the opportunity to work in home care, domiciliary care, which I really enjoyed, working with a smaller team and then up to head of care, where supporting multi-site franchise. So for me, like David said, at the moment at Care Ideals, we're focusing on the sort of future and how we can support providers. And I'm looking forward to talking through as many CQC questions as we can fit in.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yes, we're going to aim to fit in as many CQC questions as possible. So all of these questions have either been shared with us beforehand from different flock members, or we were always happy as well to take any questions live. So please use the chat function if you want to add a question to our experts. The first question, which I think is potentially quite a big one, is what are the main differences between the old way of doing things, so the Chloes, what we got used to, and this new way of doing things, this new world of the CQC?
Okay, so I'll start with that one. So what do we really need to know? The first bit that we really need to know is that the regulations haven't changed. There's an amendment to one of the regulations around supporting people that live with autism, but the regulations haven't changed. There are some key differences. The previous way of working, the structure, the framework was a little bit more fragmented, and previously there were different frameworks for different sectors, and now they've unified that and put that into the single assessment framework, which hopefully should make things easier moving forward. The Chloes still remain, so we've still got that safe, responsive, caring, effective and well-led. But the addition to that is the 34 quality statements that I know when they first came out, the same as a lot of care providers, we read them and all went, oh, what do we do with that? But they do map back to those key lines of inquiry. So bringing it right back to those key lines of inquiry. The assessments themselves, the approach has changed. So previously we would have seen periodic on-site assessments. The assessments now, having been through a few recently as well, it's a continuous process. There's dynamic ratings, and there is more potential to send information over digitally, which in the past the assessment would be done, the inspection would be done with the inspector sat in the premises. But now with digital systems, we can do things a little bit differently, which means the data is gathered via observations and feedback, a lot of feedback. So evidence is a real key part of that, and how we evidence we meet these quality statements. Again, making sure that you know and understand those 34 quality statements and how you can evidence how you're doing really well with those, how you're achieving those, documenting your information, so that when the inspector does come, the observations are seamless and they can talk to your staff and meet with you. Now there's this sort of, again, that we're looking at some good partner feedback. We're looking at a lot more involvement from service users, clients, residents, and from external stakeholders. So it's really good to get that feedback. So the key for that is maintaining those relationships, not just with your clients, residents, service users and families, but also your stakeholders and your partnership working throughout. Again, there's always been that focus on user feedback, but it was very heavily focused on the compliance side of things. The inspection method now is, that feedback, that client, that carer voice, and really bringing that to the forefront. It's looking at the experience. Again, it's really about designed for that consistent approach. If anyone's had their inspection yet, I've been through one recently. Actually, I found that the observation part of it was a bigger aspect and a bigger focus, and there was more time for the inspector to actually talk to the residents in the home I was at, which was really nice because it's their voice that comes through. And whilst there is still the requirement for paperwork, documentation and evidence, being able to use digital systems to send that in sort of retrospect or afterwards was really good. That continual feedback from the inspector throughout the process, again, was really useful, because previously we would have just had the inspection and then the report, but having that inspector there to support throughout and to give feedback for us to start working on was really useful too.
So feedback is king.
Yes.
Evidence is king, even more than they may have been previously. I think that's sort of a big change, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think as well, the people need to ensure that risk management is still the baseline of everything. I can't give the most pronounced piece of advice I can give is make sure that your risks are being managed correctly across the board. How you recruit your staff, making sure that you're following safe recruitment practices, that your care plans are focused on risk, that you're doing risk assessments, that you've got a really robust quality assurance system in place, where you're not only doing audits, but you're identifying shortfalls and then acting on those shortfalls to dilute and negate those. That still remains. And although you've got, I think there used to be about 303 key lines of inquiry that are now 34 quality statements, the underlying principles remain the same. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Document everything. Make sure that you're managing risks correctly. Focus on culture. And in terms of your 5 key questions, safe, effective, caring, responsive, and well-led, caring, it's what people in care do naturally. I think this now, probably more so than previously, focus on safe and well-led, and then effective and responsive should then look after themselves, because you're focusing on the safe and the well-led elements.
I think that sort of is a really good summation of a good way to approach CQC if it's something that you are nervous about as a provider, whether you're new, whether this is come off the back of a bad inspection. If you are sort of nervous around it, just focusing on safety and well-led, will then help everything else sort of work through naturally. So I think that's some really, really good advice, and especially about what's changed. Maybe not too much, but we just need to focus on evidence, feedback, and focusing on those two key questions. So I had a question that came in, and again, for anyone who is here right now, please feel free to use the chat function. You should see a little message bubble next to the number of people on the call. Please do add questions in there if you have them for our amazing experts. One of the questions that had come in before was, as a new provider, so there are a lot of sort of, on Flock, we're lucky to have a sort of range of people who are incredibly experienced, all the way through to people just starting their businesses. For those who haven't got a CQC rating yet, what are some things that they can do to make sure that their business is still around until the CQC rating comes through?
Yeah, and it's, I think a key thing for any provider is to decide what area of the market you're going to be looking at. Is it going to be local authority clients? Is it going to be private clients? Is it going to be live-in? And once you've clearly identified that, you need to market accordingly. But I think whilst you're waiting for your rating, you might find it difficult to get listed with the local authority because you don't have a rating. So you might get some overflow referrals from the local authority, but you might not. In that case, I think you need to look at the private side of it. So you can still, even if you don't have a rating, you can still go out and market your business to private clients. But you can also then do non-regulated work. So, for example, I've spoken to a couple of providers in the last few weeks, and they're doing almost like a concierge type service, where they're offering to pick up people's dry cleaning, or somebody's got something that they need to be delivered to somebody else or be delivered somewhere, and they'll go and do that. Doing manicures and pedicures, and they need obviously train their staff to do the manicures and the pedicures, but don't think it's just, this is a very kind of narrow range in terms of the type of care that we can provide and how we deliver it. Always be thinking outside the box, because domiciliary care in particular, it's incredibly competitive. You know, I think there's more than 12,500 providers within England. So really, really competitive, ranging from really small ones to your bigger franchise operations like Home Instead, etc. So you've got to continually be thinking outside the box. But whilst you're waiting for that rating, and you could be waiting for a pretty long time, market to private clients, whether that's going in for like an hour 3 times a day, or live in as well. But then also look at the non-regulated activities that you can do.
I think in addition to that, it's a really good opportunity. So I think it's really important to continue focusing on that sort of networking, that community engagement, to push your business as much as possible in the areas that you can in non-regulated, like David said. But it's also a really good opportunity to use some of that time where you might not be as busy because you haven't got all these regulated clients, to really get your foundations right and your foundations in place for CQC good, CQC outstanding. So that's setting up and making sure that you've got really good, strong governance processes, that you've got the right policies, procedures in place, that your recruitment is on point when it comes to safe, using really established processes. So there's some real good time that you can use there. But understandably, as a business, you're still going to need to bring revenue in. So like David said, the non-regulated activities is still really beneficial. So again, that networking, engaging with stakeholders, letting people know who you are and what you intend to do in the future, but definitely having those conversations, setting those foundations up from the get-go.
Great. I think that's some really good advice, because we've definitely heard from a lot of people, so not just people who haven't got an inspection yet, but also people who are waiting to be re-inspected. There's stuff you can do in that delay, because there will continue to be a bit of a delay, I think, in terms of those inspections and re-inspections coming through. There's lots of things where you can take control and you can be a bit more in control of, and so there were some really great suggestions there from both of you, so thank you. And again, if anyone has any questions, pop them in the chat. In the meantime, this is another question which we had, which came through before, which is, how much time per week should I, as the registered manager and owner, spend on CQC admin? It feels like hours right now.
In short, you shouldn't. I think if you look at your business, it's made up of systems and processes, and if those systems and processes are functioning the way that they should be ideally, the work that you're doing to prepare for CQC or to be ready for CQC, etc., should just be part of what you're doing day to day. A good quality assurance process that will ensure that you're doing audits, checks, all the compliance elements, your training stats, your care plans are correct and they're up to date, accident and incident analysis, complaint analysis, safeguarding analysis, all of these different elements that make up a good quality assurance process, and all of these different tasks that get completed day to day. As part of doing that correctly, robustly, and making sure that there's follow-up and you're closing the circle, so to speak, a lot of that is your CQC work. So unless you've been given a particular task, I don't know, maybe you had a warning notice from CQC or you have to complete your PIR. Other than that, your preparation for a CQC inspection shouldn't be a specific thing. It should just be what you're doing day in and day out as part of your systems and processes. And then when CQC turn up, then if they turn up physically, you show them to an office, you give them all of your files, all of your data, all of your information, all of your analysis and your audits, and you give it to them. It shouldn't be something that you should panic about. And it's not something that your staff should be afraid of, CQC turning up. If you've got your culture right, you're managing risk properly, you've got a robust quality assurance system and processes in place, that is a large part of what CQC will be looking at.
So again, it's about focusing on your business, your team, your client, not on CQC.
Yeah.
I think that's a key point, which I think is going to come through again and again. If you get really obsessive about the CQC and all the ins and outs of it, you will, that way madness lies. So focus
100%. You know, and when Lorna and I are talking about this, we're talking about this from learned experience, because we've been there and done it. We've been registered managers. We've been in like really, really pressurized crisis management situations. We've seen the best of it. We've seen the worst of it. So any registered managers on this call or any business owners, we know what you're dealing with because we've been there ourselves. It's not stuff we've read in the textbook. It's because we've been there, so we understand it, and we're taking that experience and sharing that advice with people.
I think the other thing with that is as well that if you look at, you know, on experience, if you look at CQC as a sort of separate task rather than who you are and what you do day to day, tasks can be pushed to the wayside, tasks can fall back. But if it's part of your foundation, if it's part of, and if it's intrinsic to how you work, then the chances of it being missed or not getting done are slim to none. So it's really about embedding that CQC focus in all of your processes and in the way that you work. And your team's mindset is that we're always ready for CQC. We don't need a day to prepare for it because we're ready for that, because we have these processes, policies and procedures that keep us on track. So it's really about, again, just comes back down to the foundations and keeping that as part of who you are and how you work.
Yeah, I think that absolutely crucial for not going mad but still managing to sort of to eventually meet CQC expectations when they do come. We've had a number of questions coming through on the chat, which is very, very cool. Thank you, everyone. If you do have a question for our experts, then put it in the chat and we will get to them. I'm going to just try and combine a couple of these together into one. So we had a question from Rachel on how do you go about setting up non-regulated activities in your business, and then one from Raf on what can and can't you do while waiting for CQC registration. So I think to maybe try and tie these together, is there a way someone can find a specific list of these are the things that are non-regulated activities, or is it just a case of sticking to very basic things like gardening, maybe housekeeping? Any thoughts on exactly what these non-regulated activities could be and how you could start doing them?
Lorna, do you want to pick that up and then I'll follow?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously with the non-regulated activities, there's certainly things around the home. So you've got your home help. It might be some light cleaning. It might be, I mean, you mentioned helping someone tidy their garden. There's a big element of companionship, because a lot of the time when people start their care journey, before it gets to crisis point, it might just be that they're a little bit lonely, or they need some sort of community engagement. So there is real opportunity with that as well. So it's remembering that we can look at companionship. You can support someone with going to appointments, with going to out to their shopping, to go to local groups, and to keep them active. So there's a lot you can do in that sort of area as well. So there are certainly, it feels like there might be a big list of things you can and you can't do. It's just understanding the difference between personal care. So you don't want to be sort of crossing that line and providing a service that you shouldn't be. So I think steer clear of, there's a lot of things that you should obviously steer clear of to protect yourself. But I think if you're looking at home help, companionship, and making sure it's something around that person in that sort of aspect, I think you would be fine with that.
Running errands,
yeah,
those types of things, those are all non-regulated.
Yeah, and you can also network and market for that. So there's still a lot of opportunity in those areas, because actually the care sector, as it's grown, we've grown with domiciliary care providers who are very and not for, it's not a terrible thing, because we have to have those task focused personal cares, but actually there is still a big market for people to have companionship, to get out and about, because that is preventative. If you've got companions, if you've got someone helping you to run errands, and you're still maintaining that quality of life, it can actually prevent the need for further or larger interventions in the future. So again, it's talking to your local authorities, because they will have they call it different things in different areas, but like a live well guide, where you can advertise your services from a non-regulated perspective. You can still do a lot of work around engagement with the local community, popping along to different groups, talking to people about how you can support. And those people that do need personal cares, if you're not registered and you're not ready for that yet, they will still remember you if you're friendly, polite, and you have that good sort of referral system. So it's still worth talking to people, but definitely worth pushing that non-regulated stuff to get you up and running, and to sort of tide you over.
The non-regulated elements, those you can continue to do, I hope, once you're registered with CQC. But in the lead up to getting registered, those non-regulated activities that you're doing, it gets you known in the local community, so that when you are registered, people already know who you are. It's not just a new person or a new company that nobody knows who you are. You can use that really effectively to market and sell your business in the local community before you get registered. And once you're registered, you can then tell people, right, this is my company, you know me. We're now regulated to be able to provide, or registered to be able to provide regulated activities.
I think that there's some really great advice there. Definitely the point around sort of carrying on these activities, even once you may have, because not only is it good to be able to provide these services, because they are much needed and can definitely help from the prevention of things, but if you do these even before you start delivering care, it gives you a chance to get your house in order and start practicing those good business practices, and building a strong team and a strong way of kind of collecting feedback and managing evidence. So yeah, potentially you can use it as a strength rather than a weakness if you are waiting for that CQC thing. So we did have a question on the digital portal, which I will come back to, Gary, because I think that's a fun one for everyone. So I'm just going to quickly touch on a nice question that came in from Nacadia as well, which was, how do I find a mentor for me as a new provider? Initially, I would say, community groups, things like Flock. It's nice to have you here. It's good to chat to people. As an industry, I think we're we're very warm, welcoming. You know, we want everyone to do our best, and yeah, I think you've made a start by reaching out on Flock. But David, BT, what can you recommend in terms of finding a mentor as a new provider?
I think that's something that we could do if people approached us. We would be quite happy to do that. But I think in your local area, there will be chambers of commerce, those types of organizations that you could also speak to, or speak to your local authority or your council. They might have those types of support groups. So any of those options, that's what I would look to do if I was looking for a mentor.
If you're looking for a mentor from a registered manager's perspective, because there's also there's definitely the business element with local authorities, chambers of commerce. If you are looking for it from a registered manager's perspective, your local authorities might be able to put you in touch with a registered managers network that's in that area, and they more often than not will have meetings, and you'll have someone that you can contact. But also skills for care are really useful for conversations around that, and registered managers networks as well. So it would be good to explore that.
Yeah, I think the key thing is that there are people out there. Definitely, we'll be sharing some contact details for the Care Ideals team as well in the follow up to this and at the end. So we're here to help. let's get your business flying. So yes, if we can turn briefly to the digital portal, we had a question come in from Gary. Hi, are there any plans to abort the CQC's current portal rollout and revert back to previous ways of submitting notifications? The use of the portal is frustrating and not fit for purpose. We have heard on the grapevine that it may be going. Thanks. Any thoughts or updates on that question from Gary?
So I don't know if the portal's going. I haven't heard anything like that. But I have been involved in lots of conversations in the last probably 6 to 8 weeks, trying to help a lady who's got 3 care businesses sell these care businesses to 2 separate providers who aren't currently providers. They're applying to become providers. So Gary, I share your pain. Believe me, we've had all sorts of problems with the portal, trying to get information uploaded, etc. And 2 of the care businesses that were being sold to the one person, eventually CQC came back to us and said, well, this clearly isn't working. You've tried repeatedly. You can submit everything using the old paper documents, the Word documents. So there are ongoing issues with the portal, unfortunately. I saw a post on LinkedIn. It would have been from one of the banks, I think it was. And this particular head of the healthcare division, I think, or the social care division, he had posted or had written an article about the problems that they're experiencing with getting businesses sold because of problems with the portal. Because obviously a sale process, selling a care business is completely dependent on the registration being moved across. And because of the holdups and the problems being created by the portal, this was dragging on for months and months and months, where a few years ago it was being dealt with in weeks. So the problems with the portal are unfortunately real, and it is impacting on many different providers, banks, people arranging finance, solicitors, etc. Unfortunately, at the minute, there's nothing we can do. We just have to carry on. Through this process, I've spoken to a number of people at the CQC call center. They've been very helpful. They've been really responsive, and they've gone out of their way to help me with my queries. But unfortunately, the problems with the portal are real, and we're kind of stuck with it for the minute.
Yes, I think the key thing is that you're not alone. If you are struggling with the portal, so the CQC are aware that there are issues with it as well. So it's not in a vacuum. You know, they're not. Hopefully, you shouldn't be impacted by anything or being seen as having done something wrong, because it's not on you. It's issues with the portal. So I think there was another question I'm just getting clarification on. Otherwise, one of the questions that came in before, I'm not particularly tech savvy, and I'm worried about submitting evidence digitally and through the digital portal, especially as it hasn't worked so far. Do you have any advice for non-tech savvy providers when it comes to getting their house in order for CQC?
Call the helpline as often as you need to, the CQC helpline. I think their number's 03000 61 61 61. That's just a reflection of how many times I've called them.
Yeah.
I know that off by heart. Take down all the numbers that they give you. They've changed their reference numbers. They're now called case numbers, and they always start with CAS. And then there's lots of letters and numbers that follow that. Always take that down so you can refer back to that if there's any follow-up, any queries. But make sure that anything that you upload to the portal, you keep copies of that. Don't type directly into the portal and then submit an answer or save an answer, and then you go back onto the portal a day later and that answer is no longer there. So make sure that everything that you type out, all of the answers that you're providing when you're doing whatever it is on the portal, that you've kept PDF copies or Word documents with all of those answers on those listed. So, for example, this exercise I'm doing for this provider who's trying to sell these 3 care businesses, I've written out all of the responses to the 34 quality statements on a Word document, and then I'm just copying and pasting those onto the portal. So please keep copies of everything, but also keep copies of all the reference numbers that they give you.
Question just came in from Lawrence. What was the number you've just quoted, David?
03000 61 61 61.
Let me just pop that in reply. 03000, in case you didn't get that there, Flora. 03000 61 61 61.
And then they give you different options. If you're looking, if it's about registration, I think it's option 3. I think it is.
Very good advice. Thank you. Great. So I think let's move away. Let's move away from the portal for now. I think going to sort of general running of a business and trying to make sure that obviously within all that you are compliant. A question had come in terms of how can we ensure that our care plans meet CQC standards?
The starting point for this must be the people who are writing the care plans. Make sure they understand what a good care plan is. I've been into so many providers where there's issues with the care plans, and it's quite often the people writing the care plans have never been shown what a good care plan is, and it's so quite often so you go from carer to senior carer. As a senior carer, part of what you're doing is writing care plans, but nobody's shown them how to write a good care plan. So for me, the starting point has to be find somebody who can show your staff, somebody who's genuine, they know what they're doing, how to write a good care plan. Once you've done that with a good care plan, focus on the risks that are presented by the person, your client or your resident, if it's in a care home. Focus on the risks that person presents, whether it's the mental health risks, the physical health risks, but make sure that the care plan is personalized to their particular risks. Look at their likes, their dislikes, their personal history, what they like to do, their hobbies, because that'll help you know what to talk to the client or the residents about. If you understand their background and what they like to do, what they don't like to do, what food they like, what their interests are, that will help you start and initiate conversations with them. But with the care plan itself in terms of the physical health, the mental health, all of those elements, the care side of it, make sure you're looking at the risks posed by this person's particular presentation, and that the care plan comprehensively addresses those.
I think it's also important to think about language and terminology that we use in care plans. So that comes back to what David had mentioned initially, is the person that's writing it needs to understand what does good look like. Because I mean, in my past, I've read care plans and I've seen the words that a client is fully ambulatory. That's great, but does your carer that's reading that understand what that means? Does the client or the resident that has that care plan for them, about them, want that sort of language and terminology used about them? And it's also then thinking about your outcomes, because as part of the CQC single assessment framework, we're looking at experience, we're looking at outcomes. And if you look at care plans and every client or resident that you've got has got the same outcomes, then it's not person-centered. It needs to be an individualized, person-centered outcome to that person. So if I see on every single care plan that everybody wants to have a healthy, well-balanced diet, which don't we all, would be lovely. But what does that look like for that person? Do they want some support to cook, to go out and buy fresh vegetables? So it's really about tailoring it to that person, and making sure that we make, number one, the care plan accessible and really informative for the carers, but it means they can understand it and they can support their service user in the best possible way. But again, really focus on those outcomes and how you're going to achieve them, and document it in your care plan.
And I think all of this is made easier as well if you are using sort of digital care software. A lot of this software now has what good looks like baked into it. So obviously, Birdie, I know, has sort of, in all of that care planning, all of the risk assessments, all of that, it has it baked in. So when you're generating it, you don't need to worry whether you've covered everything or whether it's CQC, compliant. So that's the same for many digital tools right now. They're getting a lot better. This was an interesting question that just came in from Ashley, though. When you're writing a care plan, should it be within first person, as if it's them speaking, or we're writing the information from their perspective? So should it be what I would like orange juice, or should it be they would like?
I mean, sometimes it can be difficult, because sometimes that person might not be able to give you all that information themselves. I think whichever one you choose to use, I think there's a strong preference towards I, because that's really sort of person-centered. That's really taking that person's point of view on. But if you use the other one, if you use they or I, that's still fine. I would tend to use the I more, but just remember to keep it throughout. Because what you don't want is on one part of your care plan to say I would like fresh orange juice, and on the next part they would like, because it shows that actually there's that, just you're interchanging, and you need to keep it consistent throughout the care plan. I think whilst you're able to keep it focused on the person and use the I think that would be the preference for most care plans.
And I guess what I've always used as a general rule is, if the resident or client, so resident in a care home, client for domiciliary care, has capacity, I would write it in the first person. But if the person doesn't have capacity, I would write it in the third person.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good rule of thumb, and obviously, sort of, it does help sometimes with the person-centered care angle as well to think through what approach you're after. Rachel asked a question of where you can see an example of a good care plan. We will be sharing some resources after this call, which will include sort of examples of a really good sort of care plan, CQC compliant care plan for paper-based organisations. So if you are still on paper for a lot of your operations, we've got some things available as well, and in the resources on Flock as well. So don't worry, for anything resource-based, we'll be able to help you out. So I think the other questions that have come in, right. So say that you have been, oh, sorry, it's my dog. Don't know if you can hear that. She's just tried to log on to the digital portal. So you have been inspected and maybe you didn't get the result that you were after. How are you best to handle any identified areas of improvement from a previous CQC inspection?
I think the first thing to do is just sort of stay calm and understand how that's come about. So you have to really read your report. You have to really know and understand why you've got into that situation. Then you need to look at an action plan and develop a clear action plan to move forward. So it's about thinking about that continuous improvement and moving forward. It is about action. It's about taking, looking at what needs to be done immediately, what needs to be done to keep people safe and people well, and really sort of focusing on that, looking at training and awareness of your team, preparing your team for future CQC inspections, and really sort of focusing on areas of improvement, action plan, taking action, and moving forward.
I think just to kind of echo what Lorna said there, during the inspection, you'll have a pretty good idea that it's not going well. And the issues that are being highlighted by the inspector, start dealing with those immediately, the same day if you can. And if you, let's say, end up with a warning notice or inadequate rating or whatever it is, make sure that you've got a clear plan in terms of how you're going to address this. Communicate clearly on an ongoing basis with CQC and the local authority, because the local authority will be aware before the report comes out whether or not it's your CQC inspection's gone well, not well, etc. Communicate with relatives, your clients, your staff. Have a clear action plan in place and make sure that you're dealing with all of the issues that CQC identified, that you're dealing with those and you're communicating proactively with CQC to show them that all of these issues are being addressed, and do it quickly.
And I think the only other bit that I would add on that I didn't before, was to communicate with your staff, be open and honest. So we've talked about transparency with CQC, but communicate with your team, communicate with your relatives, residents, clients, because sometimes it's better for them to hear it there from you. So it's about being open and honest, moving, again, awareness and training, but it's about communicating why you're doing things, why you're making changes. So it's about keeping those channels open as well.
Yeah, I think that transparency and honesty is really key, and people respond to that, and that will only benefit your business in the long run in terms of trust with people if you're open about the changes you're making. And ultimately the CQC wants to know that you are making those changes and you're working towards the improvement. So all of that transparency will come out good in the end. I think this sort of links to this in a way, was what methods can we use to ensure that our leadership and management are seen as effective by CQC inspectors? And if possible, I'd like to include a sort of related question that come in the chat: how to ensure that our recruitment processes are robust. So taking this entire look at sort of leadership, management, how you hire, how you onboard, how you run your team, what are some top tips to make sure that they reflect the well-led CQC category?
I think sort of looking at the leadership and the management part first, you have to demonstrate that you've got a clear vision. So you need to have that when you are talking to your CQC inspector. You need to demonstrate that clear vision, that clear strategy on who you are, what you're doing and how you're going to achieve it. So you need that in place. We've already talked about the foundations, that good quality assurance system, the robust good governance. You need that in place so that you can confidently engage and talk to your inspector. If you've got that behind you, it makes it so much easier to have those conversations with your inspector on the day. You don't want to come across as defensive or evasive when you're talking to your inspector. So information, documentation and evidence really gives you that confidence to engage with them. There's always that element of closing the loop as a leader or a management in social care. It's really important to make sure that we are closing that loop with all aspects of the support that you provide. So making sure that you haven't got lots of opened events or incidents for your clients, your residents or service users, making sure that you are proactive in when something happens or you've got an alert for a client, that you are following that up, that you are really making sure that you are closing that loop, that client is safe, that staff member is safe, that resident is safe, and that you can show what you've done, how you've done it, and how you're going to stop that from happening in the future. So there is also that element of risk management, making sure that your systems identify risk and ensure that it's acted upon. So again, identifying it where possible beforehand so that you are using that as a real risk assessment, risk management tool. If things do happen and incidents happen, it's about managing them safely and learning from them. So it's a learning culture, a learning environment all the time. Really investing in your staff. That shows great leadership to support and develop your team so that you've got a really strong team to make not only your lives easier, but the quality of care is enhanced by that as well. Obviously, you want to be compliant with regulations. So knowing your regulations, knowing that what you're doing really sort of does what it should do safely. Lead by example as a leader and a manager. When they are there, they're doing their observations, but all of the time, not just when they're there, all of the time, lead by example. So when they're looking at these new quality statements and they're getting that feedback in that well-led section, that your team will hopefully say wonderful things about you, and that you're a visible leader, that you're in the room, that you're really leading the team. You've also got surveys that you can look at, that you can get information from. They can speak to stakeholders, but it then comes back down to communication and how you feed that back to your staff, relatives, residents and clients. So there's a big part to well-led. It's quite a big chunk, but it's really about, there's a lot about information and evidence and structure. There's also a lot about having the confidence, but you can't do that without the information, the evidence and the structure. And what was the second part? Sorry, it was. Did you ask?
I just included that in there at the end. Was sort of the is recruitment part of this in terms of demonstrating that you're well led?
Yeah, so obviously recruitment, it comes under safe as well, comes under few different key lines of inquiry, but you want to make sure that anybody that you bring on board is safely recruited. So having a good checklist, making sure that you follow those safe recruitment checks, and that you maintain that standard, because the last thing you want on your inspection is for them to pull out that star file where there's not a missing DBS or there's a missing reference. So when we're really busy, it's really easy to, when we look at recruitment, to say, well, we really need this person on board and we need them on board yesterday. But have a standard and set that standard that they're not going to be pulled through and start with you until this checklist is complete and their basic safe recruitment processes are in place. So you need to know what the basic requirements are for safe recruitment and make sure that when you are looking at that from a recruitment perspective, that you maintain that standard. It's who you are. Again, it comes back down to it being intrinsic to who you are and how you work.
Could I just quickly, a key thing is understanding the difference between being a good leader and being a good manager. And it's really, really important. Over the years, I've met people who are really good leaders, but they're not great managers, and really good managers, but not great leaders. And as the owner or the registered manager of a care business, is clearly understanding the difference between those two. And then just moving quickly on to the safer recruitment, like Lorna said, have an understanding of what the minimum acceptable is for safe recruitment, but make sure that there's an application form and a CV ideally, but an application form as a minimum. Make sure you've got a DBS. Make sure that you don't take an overseas police check as a replacement for a UK DBS. Make sure that you've got interview notes and that the interview notes have been scored. Ideally, the interview notes should be the interview should be conducted by 2 people. That you've got ID information, copies of passports, copies of utility bills, etc., etc. And then beyond that, if it's people coming from overseas, you're employing people from overseas, make sure all the right to work documentation, all of those stamps that people have in their passports and the information that the confirmation information you have from the Home Office, make sure all of that is in the personnel file. Sorry, those are 2 fairly short answers because we're running out of time. There's a lot more to talk about, but I know we're running out of time. So,
no, I think lots of helpful things in there. I mean, obviously, it is difficult. It's a very abstract idea of be a good leader, be a good manager. But I think do look out online for checklists, processes, things which you can sort of tangibly go through. One quick other piece of advice that I think came from the caring view as well is in each internal meeting that you have, you can take one of the quality statements and just spend 5 minutes as a team discussing it. And that helps sort of everyone understand that you're on top of what's happening, that they're on top of what's happening, and, you know, breaking down these really big things into quick everyday actions like that. As you said, we are coming close to time. It's amazing how an hour flies. So I'm just going to ask 3 very quick questions. So speedy questions, speedy answers, if possible. The final one will be, where can people find out more about you guys? First one is sort of, how important is it to either consider using digital technology or moving on to software as a business to help maintain CQC compliance?
I think it is very important. I'd actually put a note on before to say that it was significant change for me. So I've worked in a paper-based system and I've moved over to digital systems in the past. And I think just with the sort of technology side of things, it's having things at your fingertip. It is far more responsive. It ties in really, really well to your key lines of inquiry, to those quality statements on how it can keep people safe. And it just makes it easier from an efficiency point of view. So you're not having members of staff having to go out and collect pieces of paper or to type up, print out care plans. It's rapid, it's responsive. So again, your key lines of inquiry, you're able to update a care plan there and then, which then means that your quality of care is enhanced by the fact that you've got this system. And it also then has the option for data-driven decisions. So you can see it on your dashboards and you can see that it's there. And the scheduling side of things is fantastic, makes things so much easier. You can move away from spreadsheets and bits of paper and post-it notes, whatever it is you use. It's so much easier to manage safely a client's care needs.
Yes, I mean, we definitely obviously believe that, you know, over at Birdie, but it's not to say that you're not doing the best you can by your business and everything. If you're still using paper, you can still go a long way, but definitely in terms of making it easier on yourselves, consider a digital platform that works for you. As we are running so close to time, I have one question before I throw it over to you guys. Do you have sort of, what's your one tip? What's your one kind of quick tip for someone who is just overwhelmed and feeling worried about all things CQC?
I would...
Sorry to throw this at you.
Don't panic, first of all.
Yeah.
You know, it's always resolvable, but a CQC inspection is about how you manage risk. That's the most important piece of advice I can give to anybody, how you manage risk. And if you can resolve that issue and make sure that everything that you're doing is about effective risk management, you're never going to have a bad CQC inspection. That is the answer. And this is coming from somebody who's, like I said at the beginning, I've seen the best of it, I've seen the worst of it, I've been in crisis management situations up to here. Manage risk effectively, and you'll never have a bad CQC inspection.
Lorna, one tip.
I was going to say chocolate. Chocolate always helps, but stay calm. Stay calm. I think that's the key part of it, is to stay calm, because it feels really easy to get sort of swept away with things, and that sort of panic mode kicks in, because we hear the word CQC and we know we shouldn't be afraid of them, and we know they're there to support us, but we still have that moment. So stay calm. And I think, like David said, just bring it back to that real process, policy, systems, processes. And it's that I like to say quite often that it's processes that keep us safe, but risk assessment, risk management as well. So really sort of look at that and review your processes, review how you're working beforehand. Don't wait until CQC drop on your doorstep. Build it in, embed it into your practice, and think about it as who you are, not as a task.
Brilliant advice. And so what I would love to end on, because I can see questions are still coming in, which is the sign of a good AMA, is where can people sort of find you? Where's the place you'd like to send people to if they have any sort of further questions or want to find out more about Care Ideals and what you guys are doing?
So we've got our website, which is www.careideals.com. Or people can just email me directly. So it's david@careideals.com.
Brilliant. Okay. And I suppose if Lorna as well, if they wanted to reach, they can go through everything.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
I was trying to get us in on the 60 minutes, which I
exactly. No, nailed it. Thank you everyone for joining us. As I said, if you have any sort of further questions, then Flock is here. Post them in Flock if you want to reach out to David or Lorna to get their expertise across. Even just getting your business set up and flying and ready in general. We'll contact them there. We will send through lots of resources after this. So if you joined us today, you will get a recording of this, additional bits and pieces, CQC checklists, worksheets, and those contact details. And thank you so much for taking an hour out of your Friday lunchtime. We're all really, really grateful for you spending this time with us. And I think it now leaves it up for me to end the live stream. Thank you everyone for coming. Go and have a really, really great rest of your Friday. And thank you, David and Lorna, for that really, really great CQC advice.
Thank you very much. And I hope people found that helpful.
I'm sure they did. Right. Take care all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, bye-bye.